Hello guys, welcome back to Supernacular. It's been a while, I understand. But anyway, today we have an interesting guest with us. It's Kaavya. The interesting thing is that like every time I meet her, she's doing some or the other thing and I don't really know what she actually does. So I'll just like let Kaavya introduce herself.
Sure. Alright, well, thanks for having me here, guys.
Yep.
So, I guess I'd like to think of myself as an environmentalist, a permaculturalist, and aspiring activist even. But I've got my background in business, IT, and the history of capitalism and agriculture. So, yeah.
So a lot of things with agriculture. So what was the initial push that actually prompted you to take up all these things?
Because not a lot of people here like consider agriculture to be one of their main fields, and seeing someone like you take that up is like, wow, okay, so what else is there that agriculture can offer us? Because even the last time that you were talking about it, it was like, oh, okay, even this thing is there. And like the things that interested me, I'm pretty sure that would interest like the viewers also. So
so it goes back to almost 10 years ago, high school, and there were 90% of my classes which are go into this room, sit in a chair, read a book, or listen to a teacher lecture. And granted, I went to an awesome school, and there was that is not on Do Not Disturb. My apologies. Okay, so there were all of these classes where you go into a room and you're supposed to listen. And then there was one student who had a class that was just outside. And his school credit was just using a shovel and having his hands in the dirt, planting seeds and tending to plants. And I was like, that looks like the fun way to learn, right?
yeah.
And so it was the first thing that was like really, truly super hands-on. And 100% of the way that I learned, that I was introduced to permaculture specifically, was just what we call experiential learning. You do it to learn it. You don't sit and read about it or listen to someone lecture. You actually get out there and you do it, and from your practice, week after week, you realize, oh, this is what problem came up, this is how we dealt with it, and either a strategy succeeded or it failed. I'm going to learn from that and progress forward into the next week. And also, all of the people that I was meeting in this space just seemed to be so loving. There was something about like a real empathy and a connection for the world. So that drew me into it. But I haven't like consistently over 10 years been in this space. That IT business background was all like Forbes 30 under 30, let's go, and let's make money, And being a 21-year-old co-founder of a venture capital invested in company in San Francisco, having a team, having people like double your age working for you is really like a power trip. But that day came where I said, look, my whole day is spent on helping rich people get richer.
Yeah.
And I've used more energy than I generated. I created more waste than I removed. Actually, the world has been damaged today because of my existence. I couldn't live with that, right? That really gets to you, and it was, unfortunately, my dream since I was a little kid was to be an entrepreneur. And at 21, I had already achieved that dream, but spiritually, something was really off. And it was that 100 years from now, who's gonna care, right? That next generation, nobody's gonna care that I had the startup that I had. But if I can do something to leave this world a healthier place than I found it, maybe they'd actually, benefit from that. They'd appreciate that. So.
The epiphany.
So for people who don't understand permaculture, give us a brief introduction on
Yeah.
what
Because not a lot of people would know the terminology.
Right.
They would know what it is, but they wouldn't know this is what it's called.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's where the activism part comes from it. Think of this, every permaculturalist might define it differently, But my breakdown is that we're going for a permanent culture, a way of living in this world that's going to work not only for all of us on this planet today, but everyone on this planet after we're gone. And the way we're doing things, that's not going to work, right? Today we're destructive, right? Our existence of like human society for sure is significantly damaging the planet. Within the next 30 years, 2050, we're expected to lose 50% of the other species on the planet.
And by 2050, also, plastic trash in the ocean is gonna like overpower the amount of living organisms in the ocean.
Oh my goodness.
If it goes the same way.
Exactly, right? So this is clearly destructive.
Yeah.
And my entire like young adult life, I kept hearing this word sustainable, right? Like our existence shouldn't harm anything. But if you were destructive for so long, sustainable is only coming back to break even. But the goal of permaculture is how do we create regenerative ecosystems? Meaning that actually the way this relationship we have to the earth, the relationship we have to the biodiversity around us is actually healing it over time, right? We're increasing the amount of species around us. We're increasing the health of the soil, right? We're replenishing all of the natural resources. Like, we're generating more than we consume. Right now, we're consuming way more than, even break even. But permaculture is about how do we learn from nature and be able to create systems that provide for our human needs while also providing for the needs of every other species here and making sure that it's such a permanent system that we don't have any of our resources in threat of not existing for future generations.
So in other words, it's like living with the environment hand to hand in such a way that everything grows and everyone grows instead of damaging or killing all the other things just for the benefit of the mankind's sake.
Yeah, my favorite word here is synergy.
Yeah, synergy.
Yeah, the synergy is this concept of like the sum of the parts is the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Okay, so that's
a nice way to put it.
Yeah, and the way it really clicked for me was you can have egg, sugar, flour, and chocolate, and I mean those are okay individually, but you put them together and put them in an oven, and out comes a cake. Right? Like we figured out how to use all of these elements in harmony to create something better than if you just were to have them individually.
Yeah.
So when you say that permaculture is living in harmony and making sure that everything is working well, people are used to seeing the regular agriculture because India is an agricultural country. We know how traditionally it's been done.
We know how to.
So if this is to be implemented, what is the first thing that people would notice that is radically different?
I think a true permaculturalist, our goal, my goal, I'll speak for myself, my goal is never solely growing the crops. It's regenerating the ecosystem, right? And that in a small way could be, I grow soil, and soil grows food. But my priority is making sure that soil itself is healthy. Right? The way agriculture is today, it has become an industry, right? It's not about regenerating ecosystems. It's not about, creating a harmony for all living beings and non-living even, right? It's money, pure, right? And agriculture, the way we know it, even Indians, was not like the way it is today at all.
It's become very supply and demand because there's so much demand and very less supply there.
Yeah.
Capitalism. Straight up capitalism, right? Pre-capitalism, no Indian was farming the way they are today. Like they were saving their own seeds, they were using local varieties, they were growing what they eat. Today, they grow whatever the corporates will buy.
Yeah.
And just because the demands and the standards are so high now, they have to use certain chemicals in order to be able to make the cut that is
Yeah.
needed these days to be sold in supermarkets.
To survive in the
things like that.
competition. Yeah.
Yeah, I think part of that is just they're being convinced of it by these fertilizer and pesticide companies. Realistically, they don't need it. Kaavya, have you heard of this?
No.
So I'm kind of new to it too, but basically Kaavya, it's like Indian traditional fertilizer. I think really based around using cow dung and a mix of other local natural ingredients. And they knew this, right? And that stuff really works.
Sounds like a Patanjali product.
But it's again, right? When we explain permaculture as you don't need to import stuff from outside of your system, right? The system takes care of itself. It's completely self-sufficient, and actually beyond that. So all of these traditional practices, like let's talk about pesticides for a second. Neem oil, right? From the neem tree, and you grind that up, and you can make this concoction from it. Totally works as an insecticide. Why don't we use that? Why are you buying pesticides? Because capitalism convinced you that unless you're buying these GMO seeds, unless you're buying your NPK fertilizers and the pesticides, you're a poor farmer. And it's almost become a culture thing of like, unless you're spending a lot of money, you're not cool anymore. But it didn't need to be that way. Like traditionally, it wasn't that way. It was much more simple. It was regenerative. It was sustainable.
Because that's what I've been seeing a lot of neem trees or eucalyptus trees just like around in the city, if not in farms. They're just in a corner, just waiting to die, and nobody knows the importance of those plants, because back in my town where I grew around eucalyptus trees, and so many things were made out of eucalyptus trees. Like oils, for massaging, for food sometimes.
Definitely.
And it's so good, like even neem for that matter.
When you get chicken pox, they actually put neem leaves on top of it, and you get the steam bath as well.
It's also used as, like in remote villages, it's also used as a toothbrush. People use it.
Totally. And in the Ugadi Panchami, that drink, right? They put the neem flowers in it. I have to drop some wisdom on eucalyptus. So forests, right? Agroforestry, again, totally a capitalistic business. The way the Indian government is doing it, right outside this permaculture farm, Aranya in Zaharabad, it's surrounded by eucalyptus groves, but it's actually a eucalyptus plantation. It's not a forest. Right? A forest has like insane biodiversity, layers of stuff, lots of different types of species. But these agroforests, like the way that they've been planted by the forestry department, is just row after row after row after row of eucalyptus, exactly done this way. And if you ever put your ear up against a eucalyptus tree, you can hear it drinking water. You'll hear like a glug, 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 glug of that much water being sucked out of the ground. And realistically, like, why do you need that much of one species in one place? That's not a real forest. But as you said, they are going to harvest those trees and get A, B, C, D, E type harvest out of it. And that, again, that's money. So that's what they're, any kid, I mean, maybe not any, but like, it hurts me to think about, like, had I grown up here, had I been like, I love forests, I want to reforest India, and I may have studied here, I might have learned just like plant one species everywhere, right? It's hard to get access to different trains of thought when that's the only type of education maybe that's available through academia.
Especially here, because like not a lot of people go in that field, and we don't even have the required required personnel to like impart the knowledge upon, or to pass the knowledge to.
So many
it's just so hard to like to even discuss about those things with people who might remotely know about those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even, so many of the farmers that I've worked with and spent time with in rural Telangana just pray that their kids won't have to go into farming. That really sucks though.
How much of it is excessive load on the amount of output that they have to give from their farm?
No, but I mean, for some reason, people think like IT is the way to go. But I was talking to a buddy about this just yesterday. Actually, a machine shop worker, right, a factory worker, is now making more money than a front-end engineer. Because they've just, again, supply and demand, right? They've saturated the IT market with bodies. And then factories and coolies and agricultural workers, like the supply of labor in these fields has gone down, causing the wages to go up. So I'd like to think that it's just, there were more bodies here, now there are more bodies in IT. Hopefully it balances out. But I don't know, already there's more money in, these actual trades, but parents, it's something about the culture, the reputation of so that's, again, the activism. Why activism? Because it's a culture thing. We've got to change the mindset of people, but you can't convince anyone to change, right?
It's very ironic that being one of the biggest agricultural countries in the world, we still not adopted or mass educated most of the farmers that are here, and they still face the issues that they've been facing for a long time.
For a long time, being even 75 years for that matter.
Totally. No,
if you know what I mean.
I used to ask farmers in rural Telangana, where did you learn, what you're doing? And they would all laugh at me and obviously my grandfather, my parent or whatever, and the closest I heard of I would see, so there's a story of when I came to do my field research, I was visiting all of these cotton farmers. One cotton farmer I noticed, he had 4 rows of tomatoes growing on the ground. In the last row of tomatoes, he stuck a wooden stick in the ground. And I was like, why did you do that? Where did you get that idea from? In my head, I'm realizing tomatoes like growing, if you put a trellis, some vertical system, whether it be mesh or maybe you make this pyramid type thing, then tomato is a vine. It can help it grow upward with that, that support system. And then it may have more produce, it may have more of an output with that support. So it clicks to me of I know what that's supposed to be, but a stick isn't really it. That's not enough support for it. And he told me, I saw this on Doordarshan, right? That Indian government TV. That's really their source of innovation, education. So they're willing to learn, but
they don't have the right source, or they don't know what the right source is.
And again, it shook me realizing that's privilege, that's my privilege, to be younger than them, to have spent a lot less time in agriculture and be able to recognize a pattern like that. Just had great mentors, great access to books, all of that I wish
so
I just transfer.
When you say that farmers are still willing to learn, so suppose you go to them with a solution to the problems that they're facing, and it is something very different to what they've been doing previously. It's a pretty big decision for them to be able to make that change, because it's a pretty risky decision, right? Because an entire season's worth of crop will be depending on this one thing. So do you think even if they were approached by all these solutions and possibilities, how adaptable are they to implementing it immediately, because it's a risk in its own right?
Yeah, great question. So it really, when I came this American kid, going out there, I get really fired up, especially when I was seeing, farmers spray pesticides on their crops without wearing a mask.
Yeah.
and then like come and like eat their rice and whatever with their hand without even washing their hands. You know, and I would get so fired up of like, this is for your own good. How dare you keep such harmful practices? Like, it's only harming you. But I learned you can never tell someone what they're doing is wrong. It's only gonna polarize them.
Yeah.
Right? Either they're gonna get defensive or they're just gonna shut down and ignore you.
Yeah.
You can never criticism is not the way to help people change, right? But what you can do is showcase alternatives and maybe explain, dangers of a certain approach without saying you're an idiot for doing that or like how dare you do that. Just saying trends have shown that these pesticides lead to all of these issues. You remember so-and-so uncle that, got that weird disease. Apparently, that is affiliated to these specific chemicals. A safe practice that I learned, that I use, is to do this, right? No criticism, no attacking, no telling anyone they're wrong, simply giving them the opportunity to be open-minded and learn about something different. And if when they're ready, they may choose to start experimenting with it and accepting it, but no forcing anything on anyone is really what, especially as a foreigner, right? Coming in and so easily they can brush you off being like, who are you? What do you know about agriculture? Like, how many hours have you spent on the land? So, yeah.
That will always be there, so what, you have academic knowledge, we have experience on our soil.
Totally fair, right?
Yeah.
Because how much should we trust academia anyway, right?
Yeah.
Agroforestry, that's one example, crop rotation. How about you just don't damage the soil so you don't have to do crop rotation and stuff like that. And even, coming from what I'd like to say is #1 public university in the entire world, UC Berkeley. But even there, when I'm trying to study something the scene of agriculture and capitalism in post-colonial India, I'm really just seeing one side of the story. And it's that one narrative that, the Western world has written. And there's so few farmers who are giving their side of the story into academic papers, right? So we have to be careful of discourse. This word discourse is basically whose language are you reading? And even this concept of calling it a third world country. That using those types of words makes you have a certain perspective, and then you're approaching your entire investigation exactly in a biased manner. So I really respect academia, but we have to take everything with a grain of salt and realize it's not perfect. We gotta learn.
So just to address the gravity of this problem, I know lots of our viewers right now would be confused as to why this is being discussed or why permaculture is a thing and why we should go towards it. So what is the, if we can see a difference between difference between just keep on doing what we're doing versus permaculture, what would that be?
Yeah, I had this interesting conversation the other day where it was an intro to permaculture class I was teaching, and one student was basically asking, but it sounds like you're kind of asking us to go backwards from where we've come. We've had so much progress, how are you going to discredit that progress? And then yesterday, had a conversation where at one point we just stopped and realized, wait a minute, it seems like the most technologically advanced or the civilizations that had the most progress, from the Egyptians who built these crazy pyramids and had some, way beyond their time technology, to the Aztecs who, were doing all of this stuff again, in a technologically advanced way.
Still a mystery to us.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Yes.
right? And even now, to call something like America advanced, they all had really bad practices with people. They were really technologically advanced, but they were also really hurtful, harmful to people. Like the Egyptians were building those technological advances with slaves.
Yeah, yeah.
The Aztecs were doing a lot of human sacrifices, and their war practices are really aggressive.
Yeah.
Well, and don't get me started on it.
With
Roadways and railways as well. Mostly from other countries as
Tea
well.
plantations.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially in Darjeeling, Sri Lanka.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it seems like our notions of progress and technological advancements, maybe our conclusion from, when I was talking to my friends was, when you start seeing technological innovations, it gives you some kind of high that you just kind of get lost in the greed of like, oh, I want to advance more, I want to, make an even more comfortable lifestyle for myself, but at the cost of what? And as you get more and more technologically advanced, it seems like we're able to turn more of a blind eye to the damage, like at the cost that it comes at, right?
Yeah.
And so permaculture, again, that concept of permanent culture is like, how do we pass on ethics that can really work for the world for generations to come? And the ethics of permaculture are people care, earth care, fair share. People care of, we realize we're so smart, if we don't take care of each other and each other as a whole, we're only trending towards war. Right, this whole Occupy movement in America was about this trend where the wealthy, the rich are getting way richer, and the working class, the lower class, is getting richer way slower than that wealthy class, and it's creating this insane economic divide. And by the way, Karl Marx predicted this way long ago, right?
Yeah.
And if anybody's interested in this, check out Thomas Piketty. He's a French economist who's written about how in dozens of countries, capitalistic countries, we see the same trend, right? Globally, the divide between the wealthy and the working class is
growing.
Yeah, and I mean, they're gonna one day be like, guys, we don't like the system, it's not working for us, right?
Yeah.
So who are they gonna point at? That 1%? Yeah, I think it'll be a violent revolution for sure.
Yeah. So people care, earth care, fair share. What was that thing you said? Really liked it what you said. That's gonna be a new hashtag.
Yeah. So people care, of course, right? Our communities. And about communities, it's really about local communities. At the same time, so we say think globally, act locally, right? Take care of everyone around here while being mindful of what the impacts may be of people elsewhere. Earth care is really, there's some statistic where we're consuming way more than 1 Earth's worth of resources every year, right? Like if we continue at this pace, we essentially need some 3.5 Earths to be able to sustain our practices today.
For this population that exists now.
Yeah, right, and it's growing even. Yeah, and so is technology, right? So if you look at our trends of energy use and stuff, they're only increasing, right?
Yeah.
More IT companies are coming up, more people are getting cars, and so. And then the fair share aspect is like, it would be great if we all progressed together. Not just like humans do better and then everyone else dies, or not even like us, we do better, but then the other people don't. It's really, we should all grow in harmony, like together, hand in hand, equally.
Yeah.
So when you say about permaculture, one of its aim is to preserve and make sure that ecosystem is growing along with us, like us needs also being able to be achieved.
Like
how long?
I'm so sorry. Yeah. Would you call it utopia?
Oh, this is a great question. Utopia. So, utopia, the concept of utopia is that you hit a point of perfection where there's no need for any more advance, right? It's so perfect that their evolution essentially stops. That's not the goal, at least in my mind, because regenerative means you never hit some, okay, now we're at 100%, like we got 100 out of 100 marks, we can stop progressing now. It's not that, it's that continuously year after year, decade after decade, century after century, biodiversity just increases, like, you know, there's more life and there's more resources and it's all able to live together. In utopia, there's some concept of everything is so perfect you don't need to get any better, but I don't like to think we'd ever stop.
Yeah.
No, back to the question. My question was, as basically one of its goals is to make sure that the ecosystem is being preserved, as well as our needs being satisfied. So my question is, if permaculture, if the proper guidelines and everything that it stands for is being implemented now, will it sustain all of our needs, and how long will it take to be able to get to normal and then recover from the damage that has already been done?
Yeah.
The recovery is gonna take decades.
Yeah, at least, you know. And I mean, if magically that changed everyone's mind. If that really had everybody start, if it changed the culture worldwide, then we might be able to start a timer and say this is how long it would take if we adopt these practices. The hardest part of it, though, is that there are a lot of people who don't even think that we need to change, right? Of like, even to convince them to maybe think in a different way, like acting is the next step, thinking is the first step. Even there's some barrier to implementation in terms of changing that mindset, changing the lifestyle, changing the thought. It's really hard to put a timer on that, right? To be able to predict when that may happen.
But that being said, aren't farmers the first people who notice the changes of climate change?
Yes. However, I've literally had conversations with farmers here saying, Mr. Farmer, isn't your groundwater depleting? Aren't you running out of water because of this mango orchard you've planted? Yep. So, like 2 years, 3 years from now, when you actually hit no water for 6 months out of a 12-month year, what's your plan? Oh, I'll figure it out then. They know the awareness is there, but the urgency is not.
So they're very short-term, goals-oriented.
And it's just, I want to upgrade the size of my house, or it was as simple as his actual answer to me was, I need to get my daughter married and I want to repaint my house. So I'm okay just continuing this practice that's getting me a lot of money today, even though I know 3 years from now I'm gonna have to like really deal with the effects of, you know, these destructive practices.
So back in, I wouldn't say the olden days, but earlier, suppose of the 4 seasons, 2 seasons are crop producing seasons.
Correct.
Imagine. So you've grown a lot of crops there.
Yeah.
So soil was given enough time to be able to recover and absorb moisture, whatever it needs to be done, so that it's crop ready again for the next coming season, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Do you think permaculture is something that will enable a farmer to be able to grow throughout the entire year while maintaining the integrity of the soil as well?
So the 2 seasons, which is actually exactly how it traditionally happened here in India, they call it Rabi and Kharif. One is the monsoon season crop that gets planted right about now, like the beginning of June, maybe.
Especially for rice.
Yeah, first or second week, millets as well. And then the second round is kind of the dew-fed crops or the winter crops. So it's all about water. And it's because water is probably one of the most important resources to be mindful of. Soil can be a lot more resilient than that. Great mentor of mine, Cleo Chanmal. She is a soil scientist and basically taught us soil is life and the food that life eats.
Yeah.
Right? So if you feed the soil the right stuff, those decomposers will come. They'll eat what we call humus. The biota, the life, eats the humus, the food, which very simply is browns and greens. It's all kind of carbon, but there's some leafy greens that maybe have more like nitrogen, stuff like that, and then your carbons, your browns. But if you give that to the soil, they'll break it down into the nutrients that the plants need to be able to grow properly. So that we can balance with our own practices. Like we can grow that right stuff and then we can apply those right ratio of things to the soil. The water is a lot less in our control. And it's important, and that's why traditionally, like, the practices aren't so much controlled by the soil health as they are the water cycles.
And what is essential so that the nutrients actually seep through the roots as well?
Yeah, so if we're able to ensure access to water will be available all 12 months of the year, then absolutely we can be creating crops, you know, the entire time. But let's look at a forest. You know, a rainforest is productive 24/7 and 365 days a year. Why? Because the system is set up where everything required by the system is provided there by the system. Yeah. So if we create these things like food forests, right? If you see the patterns of a jungle and recreate those same patterns, for sure it should be able to be productive all the time. And in permaculture, we can even think, not all permaculturalists will be a fan of this concept perhaps, but grafting is basically where you bring different species and you integrate them with one kind of source tree, a mother tree, I guess we could say. And there's an interesting example of an apple tree where there are enough different species grafted onto that one tree that 12 months out of the year you have some harvest. So it is possible, definitely, whether it be forests or, you know, just realizing what enjoys growing naturally in that season. It is possible. Now the probably barrier to this actually happening is, I think a lot of people might have to come out of IT. Right? They might have to come out of business. They might have to come out of what they're doing and go back and live in an eco-village and dedicate their time to caring for the community and producing whatever it is that they need. So again, back to the culture.
You know what you said, that's a hard pull to pull the ideas out of their environments right now, but it's much easier thing to implement all this education in schools itself, so that these kids aspire to
farmers themselves,
you know, aspire to bring in changes like this in such a big country.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the right way to be able to integrate this with the education system?
If there was a scope of starting.
Because renewable energy is the extent where we touch, like that's the end of it. It's like there's windmills and there's dams and stuff like that. There's nothing specific like this.
I'm really going to tag it back on the economy of, at least in America, right? The whole point of the economy is to basically breed this desire in us, this desire to spend. Right? And if you want to spend, then that means you need to make money, right? And if you look back kind of around the time of the Industrial Revolution, that's when we really created this new divide where we split people from the means of production. And we said, okay, now capitalists own the means of production and you guys are laborers. But before that, the laborers, you know, normal people, created whatever they needed, right? They had control over the means of production. It was all the same. There was no divide between those who own and those who work, right? Since that divide happened, then these laborers are always working for a wage, and then they're buying everything they need off of their market. So their means of survival is no longer self-sufficient. It's dependent on having enough capital to be able to purchase what you need from the market. And then from that point on, you can increase that desire in the consumers, right? Increase consumerism, right? The story of stuff. This golden era where the whole point is capitalism thrives off of making you want to spend money. And if you're going to want to spend money, that means you need to work for money. Not for food, not for restoring groundwater, not for restoring biodiversity, but to make money to be able to buy your consumer goods or, travel or whatnot. And I think that is really what is holding us back from rethinking our relationship with our local economies, with each other, with our land, that's why I was working on a farm, and even I came back into the venture capital IT world purely for money. Because unless you have very strong mental resiliency and a very strong support system, buying stuff does make you feel better. Being able to travel and stuff like that, I feel like it's bringing me a lot of my happiness here in India. I'm here for a limited amount of time. I want to see this beautiful country, but that costs me money. So having a job that gives me the opportunity to spend money and then on the side do things that feed my soul is, where I've come to understand is my happy place at the moment. But I really, really wish the world was set up where actually just taking care of the planet gives me the right and the privilege to be able to do all the traveling and other stuff, and getting what I need, or at least kicking that in my mind that I even need money to be able to buy stuff. It's a battle in here. So given that I'm able to speak about all this and I know it, but it's still a battle in here, means this society that we live in is so good at creating this culture that even the woke ones, right, have a tough time dealing with it. So what about everyone else who hasn't, necessarily
even thought about it?
Yeah, seen what I saw and had thoughts that I thought, then it would be so much to ask of them, as you're saying.
So coming back to the point where all these banks and corporates actually promote farmers to buy new equipment and stuff so that they have higher output, and they take massive amounts of loan that they sometimes cannot repay. And more often, especially these days, you keep hearing these cases where farmers couldn't repay their debt to the banks, and then there's a lot of suicides that happen because they just couldn't pay. And one of the Bollywood actors recently waived off a lot of farmers' debt that was there. I don't know which actor it was.
I think
we'll put it in the description. I think it was,
I'm not sure.
I don't want to say some random actor, but it happened. So it's such a terrible thing that there's not enough support system where people, as farmers, can go to an authority and then just ask for recommendation that's advisable and generally acceptable. So that fear is still there where they cannot approach people for the right advice or at least one-on-one conversation.
Totally. Well, where they're learning what is the right practice to follow from the guy selling fertilizers and pesticides. So what is he going to advise you to do? He's going to say, give me your money, of course, right? When really the answer is go to your local seed bank, right? Follow the traditional practices that have done so well for so long. You guys have evolved seeds for generations on this land. These local seed banks, they pick the best of the best. It's natural selection, right? Or I guess
it's
human.
Not natural selection.
No, sorry, But it is human selection.
It.
But of whatever, we planted these 10 plants here. Out of the 10, this one was the strongest. Let's save that seed. So it's human assisted evolution, let's call it that. But it is the natural evolution of the seed. Instead of sticking to those trends, they're switching to these GMO seeds. these things that have been produced by corporates again, right? And why were they made that way? For the sake of money.
So you're saying these are genetically modified seeds, or how?
Absolutely, yeah. So the concept of genetically modified seeds, it's maybe actually three big things. The first is that there's this concept of terminator seeds, right? They're genetically modified to no longer have reproductive potential.
So they don't have seeds. Like usually papayas these days don't have seeds. Like if you guys have observed it. Yeah. Yeah, so they're basically GMOs, through GMOs,
Yeah, and so even if they may have seeds, the birth rate, like those seeds may be very have a lot of mutations, or you plant 100 seeds and only 30 of them will actually become anything, and out of those 30 they may have a lot of mutations in the produce, right? So you're forced to buy seeds again and again and again. You're no longer self-sufficient with your own seeds, right?
Yes, because farmers usually keep a reserve so that they can plant for the next season if it's not possible anymore.
The second issue that comes with this is that they've claimed patents. And this really bothers me because it's nature, man. The human beings, especially not corporates, can't claim ownership of what nature has provided us. And so it sucks that Monsanto actually had a case of this recently where some Indian farmers did reuse the seeds because fine, even if they plant 100, even if 30 become a blend, and even if they can get 10 kgs, at least they got 10 kgs of harvest from it. And Monsanto comes and files a lawsuit against them, right? Saying that's my intellectual property. Nature is some corporate's intellectual property. And they justify it saying, look, they're genetically modified. There's some engineering and some serious science that has gone into these seeds, which is true. It's a fact. But it ethically just doesn't gel, right? If you look at the repercussions it's going to have on people, it's not in the farmer's best interest, it's not in the soil's best interest, it's not in the best interest for the evolution of biodiversity. And now that the farmers are all dependent on buying their seeds from basically Monsanto, Syngenta, and DuPont, if they decide to triple prices next season, these farmers have no other choice. Right? Because they stopped supporting their local seed bank, so that business is going away.
So that's also the case with the chicken as well. They grow a specific kind of chicken, and if it's I had read about it a really long time ago, about 4 years ago.
I think it was Food Inc.
Right?
And again, these farmers in America are I want to take better care of my chickens, but it was Tyson who said, we won't buy from you unless you stuff tons and tons of chickens into this really, really terrible environment for them. And the farmers are this is an awful way to treat living things. But at this point, poultry is my only source of income. Tyson is the only buyer around here. If I'm going to survive, then I have to, I have to follow corporate farming.
The third thing. The first was
okay. The third thing was the raising of prices, right? Just being separated from you're no longer supporting your local seed banks, and so they can triple the prices, and you're
I need a little clarity on this. So I'm a big fan of brown rice for all the advantages that it has, as it's a complex carbohydrate. It comes with husk, so it is very fibrous compared to white rice. So I'll just distinguish for viewers what difference is.
So
white rice, all white rice is initially brown rice. It's just that the husk is removed and then polished so that then the rice is white. So a lot of fiber is removed, a lot of the nutrients are gone in the husk. But the thing is, brown rice is much more expensive than white rice, even though it takes almost next to no processing for farmers to grow it. Why is brown rice almost twice as expensive as white rice? Do you have any clarity on this?
Yeah, I believe it's a supply and demand issue. There is a much bigger supply of white rice versus like the amount of demand that there is for brown rice, and the cost of it is off. It may also be that the only people buying brown rice...
It's a novelty item.
Exactly. Why are organics more expensive? If you're not paying for pesticides, theoretically it should be actually cheaper to buy, but it's not... a marketing gimmick, right? They got you. And with the situation with rice, like, you know, there are these awesome villagers working on the permaculture farm, teaching me about permaculture, growing vegetables, growing millets, growing all of this highly nutritious food, eating this much white rice with this much pickle. There's no vegetables, there's no pulses, there's no dals, right? That's not a healthy way of eating. I mean, you're a farmer, you're growing vegetables.
You should be eating the most healthiest food possible.
And not at all, and they say it doesn't taste good. How did that happen? You know, how did that happen? And really, so again with GMOs aren't all bad the whole time. Like a lot of GMOs have been, there's this concept of gold rice. It's rice with an increased nutritional value. However, the cultural adoption of it was that it was being subsidized, and therefore it was being subsidized specifically for poor people who were malnourished, so that they could get more nutrition, so that they would be healthier. And then it got branded as poor people's rice.
Oh shit.
So people are like, wealthy people eat white rice, poor people eat healthy yellow rice. And it totally failed, and again, that's what I'm telling you, it's all about culture. It's not about facts, it's not about science, it's about like this
Stigma.
what are other people gonna think about me? Whether I know it or not, you know, my priorities may be right, but realistically, I live in a society. What other people think about me, what the society says about our family, matters a lot more than whatever values I hold internally. And that's just
devastating.
Yeah, so that's I think.
So, if there's a world where permaculture works and we are going in synergy with nature, what would be your most favorite activity in the world to do?
I love this question. Harvesting jonna.
Okay, what's jonna?
Jonna is one of these millets. Don't exactly know the word for it in English, but basically it kind of looks like corn, right? So they're really tall stalks, and the way that you harvest it is like, you know, you need to actually get it all off the land, even though just the peak is really what you want, because the rest of the plant can be used again for compost and just biomass for the soil. And it was so interesting, actually. Men and women work side by side on the field, but don't necessarily do all of the same job.
Yeah.
So the women come and they just, with a scythe?
Yeah, sickle.
A sickle?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's what it's called.
Cut off just the heads, and those heads are where you harvest all of the millets. And then the men's job is to come, put both hands around it and rip it out of the ground in complete. But that's what they're breaking down again into what they can feed back to the soil. But they basically clear the field so that they can get it ready for the next
produce.
Yeah. And the women, you know, I asked them, you realize they're paying you 200 rupees a day and they're paying the men 400 rupees a day, but you guys are working equal hours in the same condition. It's the same hot sun, it's the same temperature, the same everything. why don't you women just pull us out of the ground and demand 400 rupees? And the answer was that they said, wait till the end of the day, wait till the end of the day. The day ends, and they go, show me your hands. And my hands are covered in blisters, and they go, yeah, now try to make a chapati.
Oh shit.
The day doesn't end there, right? They have to go home and cook, they have to tend to the household, they have to tend to the children, so they need their hands. The men's hands are destroyed from doing this activity, they're covered in blisters, they're chilling, they're not doing anything with the rest of their day. But the trade-off is, well, we saved our hands and made 200 less rupees, but only because they have to work even more when they go home. And the people whose day ends right there, you know, after that 8 hours or whatever, got more, but apparently they think that's fair. The man makes more and contributes money to the house, and the woman who makes less contributes domestic work back to the household. So I feel like, you know, they also give you a lot of, like, it gets you farm credit to go, and especially being a foreigner, right? Being like this little girl, and there's a lot of, like, you know, the wealthy people in farming just stand and watch and tell people what to do. But when I would get, you know, side by side and do the work, then I guess it just got a lot of respect, like the camaraderie grew, and that was a beautiful experience, like to really connect with villagers, you know, halfway across the world from where I was born. So that would be absolutely my favorite.
Nice. So another question would be, what would be the worst thing imaginable that could happen if permaculture doesn't really, you know, take shape?
Yeah, so things we're already seeing, groundwater levels really depleting, so agriculture not even being possible for some months of the year. It's the other thing of, like, a lot of chemicals entering the groundwater system.
Because of pesticides and insecticides and whatnot.
Yeah, and even pharmaceutical drugs, right? And that's getting into the aquatic life. There was this article I read recently about, like, in the UK they tested these shrimp and found, like, Xanax in them and like, you know, a bunch of really crazy, not good for the shrimp nor for us drugs. And it's just karma. It's totally coming right back to us. I think, you know, with there being a lack of water and a lack of food, you're asking for war, right? Someone's gonna have it, and those who don't are going to, what else can they do, right? Violently revolt, saying this is a messed up situation. And that gets pretty depressing sometimes, right? Considering what got me into this space was the whole, we need to leave the world better than we found it. But realistically, like, we didn't really do better this year than last.
It's even worse.
Yeah, how much of an impact am I actually making? And something, you know, there were two things I really needed to hear. One was a hope that my time will come. Right? Maybe if I feel like I didn't do enough.
Not apna time aayega. That's a different thing.
Yeah, but you know, if it feels like I haven't made the impact I wanted to make this year, the thought was like, it's okay, like the stars will align, things will fall into place, like it will happen. Don't beat yourself up on not doing more than you wished you could have this year. That was a really nice, optimistic piece of feedback. The other thing that I got, which may be more real, was maybe this is Earth's way of healing, is actually like humans needed to exist to cause so much destruction so that we can cause the next extinction so that Earth can come back from. It's almost like getting an infection and Earth is heating up, right? Like as we get a fever when there are bugs inside of us, we get a fever and we heat up so that we can kill all those bugs inside. So maybe humanity will go extinct so that Earth can continue surviving thereafter.
That's interesting because that's what has been happening. Like
Yeah.
even with the dinosaurs, with the ice age coming in, with all of that, like every time some or the other thing has happened,
If we
all
would
this just becomes.
species, we would not be able to imagine even now.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. Maybe we would change.
Not that the dinosaurs caused their
No,
extinction.
exactly. No, it
but
just could be
this
like
one
overpopulation
could be,
with
yeah.
dinosaurs. Well, if the theory that the comet actually killed them is true, then it's not really correct. It's not really the
Yeah.
right example.
But it's okay.
The ice age.
Yeah, I think what really fascinates me is that this whole like, humans might be the virus that Earth needed to get over to be able to move on. I hear aligns closely with this Hindu mythology philosophy of like you've got the creator, but then you also have Shiva the destroyer, right? And like you almost require destruction. Kali Yuga, right?
Yeah,
it's supposed to end so that the next thing can come.
The next stage.
And I mean, if permaculture doesn't work, if this culture shift doesn't happen, I guess it's a Kali Yuga where, we bring destruction upon ourselves, hopefully so that those who really have earned the karma or something like that can exist in the future even happier and healthier than life is today. Yeah, it's a worst thing, but even that you gotta spin positively, right? In this day and age, like everything has to end with why not like have a good outlook on it, right? Even the worst thing is that we really do bring the end, but it's all for the best, and these are the two messages that I needed to be able to really have my own mental healing, to say, you know what? It's worth me continuing to tomorrow. Even if maybe right now, even today, I did do more harm than good, maybe that's just what the world needed, and so gonna just carry on with the self-love about it, not beat myself up for it, and just, try to do the best job I can.
Yeah.
It's still not something that's irreversible yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So this crazy thing, right? The metric of carbon emissions in the atmosphere and the greenhouse gases are what's kind of blanketing the earth in a way that when heat comes in from the sun, and so when I was growing up, the limit of no return was 250 parts per million.
No, it's cool.
Now we're dancing around 420, so we're far beyond the point of no return. And
But that being said, here's the thing. If you look at documentaries of Chernobyl, there's still deers and wolves that exist there. So even in the worst of circumstances, if humans completely are not there, it's still possible for things to grow. And we are not
it is.
But the rest of the places yet.
Yeah.
But what would it cost?
Yeah. I'm saying if things can grow there, where things are already normal here, there's not more scope for it to be, recovered for all the damage.
Well, who knows? I mean, the galaxy is massive.
Yeah.
We may not be the only life in the galaxy. There's probably a really low chance we're the only living planet, right?
Yeah.
And then there's also the theory that this is all a simulation. Right? That the aliens have just tried seeing how many different simulations can we do, and does any of them actually end in survival? Or does it seem like every single simulation of life, or maybe human life, meets death, right? Meets its end. And maybe it's just an experiment, and there's some that realize it because of some crazy connection to their past lives or whatever, the vibrations out there, the spirits out there, and maybe, this is just a science experiment gone wrong.
Yeah.
Never know. Never know. Anything's possible. Yeah.
1 in 4 million.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it was so nice having you here.
My pleasure.
We find more educated coming out of it.
Yeah. But that's what the gravity of the situation is so much that if this keeps going on, like there are statistics like within 10 years, the damage that we are already doing would be irreversible for sure. So there's only 10 years for us to like reverse the damage that we have made, and if we don't do that in the 10 years, it's just gonna go to shit. It's just gonna be nothing. It's just gonna, goodbye Earth. I'm just gonna go to Elon Musk, I guess.
There's a limited seat available.
Yeah. Anyway, my name's going to the moon.
If Earth is actually that doomed, I'm sure Elon Musk would not capitalize on it, but it will be like 2012 movie.
Yeah.
It's like only the select few are going to Mars now.
Elon Musk is like, I'm gonna go to Mars and I'm gonna save Earth. So with the boring company and all the other like little things that he's doing, he's just like, okay, I'm here as well, bitches.
It could be one of his grand schemes where he's just telling that we're building underground towns, but it could be something else where he's going.
Yeah, maybe it could be something where you can just go and take refuge in. And
50 years later, he's like, you're welcome.
Doodles. He's somewhere in Jupiter, like chilling. I don't know, it's some.
I like the optimism.
Like Europa or some shit, like chilling by the geyser, I don't know. Wow, that just like took some different tangent now.
Some Martian geezer, right?
Yeah. Anyway, so people care, Earth care, fair share.
Yep.
What do you think are the little steps that we can take, like just being in our own households?
Yep. So definitely continuing to spread that awareness, right? Having conversations with the next generation to make sure they realize the gravity of the situation, and that it goes beyond, it's not coming from a place of guilt or shame, but it is coming from a place of woke empathy, right, for the rest of the world and all of the organisms in it, and even to the point where we just feel that oneness of it's not me and you, it's us. We are all one anyway, right? We're all just like, and do this crazy thing of like, in a period of a certain number of days, there's so many molecules from your body that actually leave, and like you get new molecules, and like those molecules might end up in like you guys later. So really, like I'm not even the same me that I was like atom by atom like 7 years ago, and so we really are one, just exchanging one thing. But going back to practical solutions, like let's take this concept of recycling, right? Recycling is really like the last best thing you can do. Before that, try to reuse, right? So like, fine, when it comes to recycling, if it is recyclable, try to go get it to where they are going to reuse that element, that bottle, the plastic, glass, whatever. Better than that would be to reuse. So can we take cloth bags to places? Even when, if I go to the grocery store, I'm getting everything in my backpack. If I'm buying any rice or dal, then I'll take my own containers, right? And I'll fill it up in that. So there is, that's actually reducing itself, right? Reduce waste at its source, right? Reduce the use of pesticides and chemicals and GMOs at its source, right? We have the power of consumerism. So we can understand what is ethical consumerism. Is it, learning, palm oil is costing us a lot of deforestation, right? Cutting down rainforests and everything.
Habitats.
Yeah, right, just to grow this one thing. So can we pay
mostly
attention?
for Nutella though.
Right, exactly, right? And so like check out, like there are 4 different peanut butters on the shelves. One of them doesn't have palm oil. It's gonna take you like an extra 45 seconds to turn them all around and realize this one, is the safe one. So let's avoid that. Other things realistically, like avoiding meat, especially beef. And there's a lot of water that goes into those things. So like dairy, beef, if we can be choosy in what we're creating. Again, the story of stuff. Remember they had this statistic of like how much stuff that you buy is actually even in use like 6 months later. Right? And so it's just, I love these people who they are like 100% of the waste that they generate in a year, they keep at home in this bucket or in this bag, and so it's really in your face. Like there's no option of being blind to it. And we can all do that, right? So again, to recap, that's conversations with people, reducing our consumption, or even if we are consuming, being mindful of the ripples or the unintended consequences of our actions.
One of the options that all of us can do at homes is to reuse the containers that you get in Swiggy and Zomato. You can use it for your pets' food, to store leaves and whatnot. And yeah, it's plastic, it's recycle, it's good, You can just come up with creative ways of storing stuff.
My aunt uses it to give gravy and everything to me whenever I come home, so she'd take it up.
Anyway. So even at our workplace also,
So we were once having lunch, and then just when we were about to throw off the containers, the maid comes and she's like, "Give me one of those because I just plant some seeds and saplings in it." So that was really touching, because even we didn't think, because we don't give a second thought where it's just like plastic. Okay, I got it for free, so I might as well just throw it off.
Totally.
So it was really comforting that she told that to us.
Yeah. Anyway, it was really nice having you on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Very, very special thanks to my mentors, Benjamin Farr, Elon from back in high school, here in India, Narsana Coppola, and everyone else that's just passed on all of their wisdom to me. And of course, my parents, don't give them enough credit, but every single human that's been in my life, I wouldn't be who I was if not for them. So thank you, everybody. You're the best.
And do let us know what kind of topics that you would like to hear from us, because we are going to be working on a lot more stuff like recycling, plastic waste, and these are just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to come.
Yeah, I mean the entire supply chain of products, the supply chain behind food, right? Like that distribution and all of that. Whatever was interesting. Yeah. Let us know. Happy to focus more on anything.
Yeah, let us know in the comments. Do not forget to tap the bell icon and whatnot. You know the jazz. Anyway, this is Supernacular signing off.
Alright.
Thank you.
Good talk.